Welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast
with our mom,
Misty Bailey. Tips and encouragement
for
real-life homeschooling
is headed your way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I am Misty Bailey, blogger at Joy in the Journey and podcaster here at Joyfully Homeschooling, where our goal is to help you have a more joyful homeschool. So today's episode is episode 9, and we are going to talk about what to do when your family does not approve of homeschooling. And I feel I have a lot of experience to share with this because I have been homeschooling since January 2009, and to this day some of my family is still not happy with our choice to homeschool. So a little bit of a backstory. We began homeschooling, like I said, we pulled my daughter out of public school preschool over Christmas break in 2008 and began homeschooling long-term in January of 2009. And I shared a little bit about our homeschool story in episode 1. If you have questions about that, you can go back and learn more about that. But we began homeschooling. At that time, we only knew one other homeschool family. And I really wasn't sure how my family would respond to homeschooling. I really hadn't given it too much thought. They knew that we had been thinking about it and praying about it, and my parents are not Christians, so we knew we didn't have that support, like the Christian support from them, but we hadn't really honestly asked their opinion much. We knew they wasn't too totally thrilled about the idea, and I don't think they really thought I would do it. So we decided to pull Allison out. And I remember the conversation with my mom first. So she had asked me, she's like, why is she not going to preschool today, Misty? And I told her, I said, well, we're trying out a homeschool group today, Mom. I told you I was considering homeschooling. And she said, please don't do that. All those kids are weird. And I'm like, Mom, I promise you they are not weird. And she said, listen, I don't want you to mess up my grandkids. And that was my conversation with her. And it repeated itself at least a dozen times in the first 2 years we homeschooled. Now, my response with my father was even worse. So I decided, for some insane reason, it would be a good idea to let him know that we were homeschooling at a Christmas family event. So my aunt at the time was my daughter's preschool teacher. And she had asked us, if Allison was excited to go back to school after Christmas break. And my dad was there, and my dad has 8 brothers and sisters, so our family is huge on that side. And so everybody was there. And I said rather loudly, no, she's not going back to school. We've decided to homeschool. And I literally silenced the whole entire room. And I mean, we're talking about probably at least 50 people. All family, completely silenced the room. And my dad's response was he got up and he walked out. And that was it. He still, 9 years later, is not thrilled with the idea. But here's the thing. We have to remember, if your family is not okay with you homeschooling, and it is hard to do this without family support. And the truth of the matter is sometimes our parents are our worst homeschool critics. And there's a few reasons why I think this is. The first one is they have the most to lose. So they know that they love us and they love our kids. And if it wasn't true, they wouldn't care what we did with them. And they want to make sure our kids have everything that we didn't have, plus some. They want our kids to fit in and have a good education and to become upstanding citizens. And homeschooling is still a new philosophy. Chances are your parents do not know any successful homeschooled adults because it's still new. And I think that in the back of their minds, they still consider homeschoolers those people who grind their own wheat and wear denim jumpers. At least that was the case with my parents. So what you can do is you can educate them, and let them know what homeschooling is, how homeschooling is done. So what I did with my mom is I started inviting her to homeschool events. And when we first started homeschooling, I was running a daycare. So I would have my kids plus numerous others. And so when we would do field trips, I would invite her to go along and help me. And she was able to see some of the other homeschool families and to see that these people weren't insane and they weren't weird. And that really helped. I did not shove statistics down her throat. I invited her over whenever we were doing school to, help with crafts or different things. And she didn't always come, but see what homeschooling looked like in person. Educate your parents. Prove to them that homeschooling is the right thing to do, at least for your family. Show them how it's done. It may take a year or 2 or 3, but by the time they come around, they'll realize that you're not messing up their grandkids. And I will say, after educating my mom, when I did my very first homeschool session, and this was I started homeschooling in January 2009, and so this would have been June 2014, because it was right before I launched my Join the Journey blog. I did my very first homeschool workshop in our county, and my mom showed up. She was in the front seat of that and told those people in that room at the end that I had sold her on homeschooling. She's still not 100% keen on me doing it through high school, but her support has come a long way through the years. And again, this did not come from shoving statistics down her throat or arguing with her. It simply came from showing her that there's fruit in the pudding, if that's the right word, showing her that, we can do things and that homeschooling is working for us and that we're not all insane people. The next thing to do is don't argue with your family. And this is a huge mistake that I made when I first started. I would get defensive, especially with my father. I would throw out statistics or say things whenever they would mention school shootings or mention bullying or things like that. I would tell him, that is why I homeschool. And I did this probably the first 6 months. And I believe that these things would make them see that what I was doing was okay, but instead it led to an argument. So the best thing to do when faced with criticism is to let it go. Homeschooling is your right, and you don't need anyone else's permission. Tell them that, state that fact to them, and let the discussion rest. You will get nowhere arguing. Again, I made the most strides, simply by just living our homeschool life and inviting them to come along. That is the best results I had with showing them and getting them to come on board with homeschooling. So the next time, like I said, if your family is against homeschooling and you're struggling with this, I highly, highly encourage you to try these few things. Educate them, model homeschooling in front of them. Let them see what homeschooling is like. Invite them on field trips. Let them come and sit on your homeschool day. Do those things and see how that works. Remember that they love us and our kids. They are legitimately concerned, and to an extent, they have a right to be. I mean, those are their grandkids. They have a lot invested in them, and they care about them, and they want to see them succeed. And so don't hold that against them. And also don't argue with them. Arguing is not going to get you anywhere when it comes to homeschooling. It is simply not. Your best response, if they start to bring it up, is to simply say, this is our decision. It is not up for discussion. We do not need anybody else's permission, and let it go. And one other thing I want to share is sometimes, and hopefully this doesn't happen with you, but sometimes your parents, your family, they may never approve. And that is a hard pill to swallow. Our choice of education for our children it can change our family's relationships, and it can change the way that our kids interact with their grandparents. I mean, at least it has for us. And I think that is something that you need to be aware of, because I wasn't 100% aware that I really thought at some point I would be able to bring him over to the other side. And here we are 9 years later, and we've not. It was really bad for a while. They would make comments in front of my kids about homeschooling. They would ask my kids if they wanted to go to public school. They would drill them on different things. My dad, my stepmom, they would drill them on things and ask them just different questions. And they made it very clear that they were not, they did not approve in whatsoever of homeschooling. And I continued to just not argue, at least for, it took me a while, but I eventually got to the point where I wouldn't argue. And it slowly tapered off through the years. And I will say that it wasn't easy by no means, but the other day, we were at my father's house after my daughter's taken leadership training at our local Bible camp, and we had went over there because they live near the camp, because we don't visit a whole lot, but we had been more recently visiting them because of this training. And we were talking, and he made the comment to me that I was the only person that he knew of that homeschooled the right way, and that he was proud of how the kids had done thus far. And it made me tear up a little bit, and because that was the first time, like I said, in 9 years that I had heard from him that I was doing something right when it came to the education of my kids. He did follow that up by letting me know Allison should have the choice to go to high school, but it was still something. And that did not come from arguing. That did not come from pushing statistics or pushing an agenda down his throat. That simply came from me living my life in front of him, educating my kids to the best of my ability, and modeling what homeschool education looks like. And he still doesn't approve, but we have made progress. So that is something to definitely consider. Your family may never approve, and that is okay. It will be hard, but it is okay. Homeschooling is becoming more mainstream, and had I known my family would not have approved of this, I would have still chosen to homeschool, because God led me down it. And if we feel that homeschooling is what He wants us to do for our family, then we need to do it whether or not we have our family's approval, because in the end, the only approval we really need is God's and our spouses. If your spouse is on board with homeschooling and you feel led to homeschool, then you do not need anybody else's approval, period. These children are yours, given to you by God, and if He led you down the path of homeschooling, He will equip you for that journey, and He will put people in your lives who will support you and who will help you along the way. So for us, that came in the form of another family in our church who was pro homeschooling. And eventually, it has come from my mom, and it came from other moms in our homeschool group. It came from online communities. Whenever I first began homeschooling and our family was against it, I joined quite a few different Facebook groups. And then I friend requested some of those other moms, because I would share with them, my family's against homeschooling. And so they would comment on my Facebook posts or leave me encouraging things on my wall and things like that. And that really, really helped having that support system. And so if that is you, then I really, really recommend reaching out to somebody else that that homeschools and getting some support, whether it be online, whether it be in your local community, because you will need a support system, especially if you're not going to get that from your family. So wrapping this up, if your family is against homeschooling, please know that you are not alone. Follow the steps I mentioned above, educate them. Remember that they love you and they do want what's best for your children, and don't argue with them. And know that they may never approve of homeschooling, and that's okay, because really the only approval that you need is from God and your husband. Our educational choices matter. They are our choices to make, but it is important to know they will have an impact on your family. And you need to be aware of that and to know that and be prepared for that, because it may be a lonely journey. But I will say that while it was lonely at first, seeing my mom come on board later and be one of my biggest cheerleaders, and then just hearing those words the other day from my dad, that is nice. So, you may get there to some point, and it may take a while, but this journey is so, so, so worth it, even if it is hard. So I just encourage you to, again, find a support group and reach out to me if you are in that area where your family is against homeschooling. Please, shoot me an email, misty@jointhejourney.net. I would love to talk to you. I would love to encourage you. I would love to pray with you, because again, I know what that is like. And yes, I would love to chat with you. So that is it for this episode of Joyfully Homeschooling. And I've not done this with any of the other episodes, but I would like to end this episode in prayer for those of you who maybe are dealing with family who is unsupportive of homeschooling. So let's just go ahead and bow our heads with prayer. Or if you're driving, don't bow your head. But let's just pray together for a minute. Dear Father, I just thank you for the freedom that you have given us in this country to homeschool. And Lord, I just ask right now that you wrap your arms around any of those moms who may be listening to this, Lord, who are struggling with having a support system in homeschooling and whose family is questioning their choices. Lord, I just ask that you just give them peace in this decision, Lord, and to comfort them and to guide them and to put a support network around them that can encourage them on this journey. And Lord, I just ask that you help them to realize that they are not alone, that you are with them, that you have guided them to this decision, and that you will equip them for this journey. And I just thank you so much for giving us our children, Lord, and giving us the freedom to educate them the way that we see fit. And Lord, I just thank you for that. And again, just be with those moms who are struggling and who may be alone or may feel alone. In Jesus' name, amen. So remind yourself again, dear parents, that your parents love you and your kids. And remember, the best education for your parents when it comes to getting them to come on board is to model homeschooling done right, and leave the statistics and the arguments for another day and time. So until next time, dear friends, I hope you head out and have a joyful homeschool.